Okay.
Perfect. We hear you when we see
David, can
you.
you hear me?
Yes.
I can't hear him.
Can you hear anybody else?
This is terrible. All right. I think we're ready now. So y'all can hear me, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
Yep.
David, can you move to the next slide, please? So I'm just going to give you a brief history of Meharry and some things about our current status, which I think will be informative to you. Next slide, David, please, sir. So our mission statement is, as you see here, Meharry is a global academic health sciences center advancing health equity through innovative research, transformative education, exceptional and compassionate healthcare, and policy influencing thought leadership. Meharry empowers diverse populations to improve the well-being of humankind. That is our mission statement that was most recently approved by my board. Next slide, please, David. So I'm going to tell you the history of the Meharry family and Meharry, sort of very briefly. So the Meharry family started out in Ireland. They moved to Scotland to escape religious persecution. Next slide, David, please, sir. So Alexander Meharry I, as I said, fled from Ireland to Scotland in the early 18th century. His grandson, Alexander Meharry III, moved to the United States in 1794. And to make a long story short, they finally ended up in Ohio, which was a free state because the Meharry family was Christian. They were strongly opposed to slavery. And Miss Meharry acquired nearly 300 acres of land in Adams County. And these were given to Revolutionary War veterans for pensions. And they bought up all of these from these individuals. Next slide, David. So by the time it was all done, they had 15,000 acres of land in Indiana, and they all moved there. And Alexander Meharry III, the patriarch of the family, died in 1813, but his six sons continued the business, which is relevant to the story. That included a grist mill. Next slide, David. So Samuel Meharry is the one responsible for Meharry Medical College coming into existence. He was the seventh child of 8 children, and he became a very successful businessman. And his 2 children died at age 5, both of them. So they adopted lots of children in their neighborhood and community. And in 1865, he became an ordained minister uh, in the Methodist Church. But an encounter by Samuel Meharry in 1826 changed the course of history for Blacks in the South. So next slide, David. The story goes that in 1826, 16-year-old Sam Meharry was driving his grist wagon in the backwoods of Kentucky or Ohio, I can't remember which, and the wagon got stuck and he couldn't get it to move despite his horses and his best efforts. He saw a modest cabin in the distance with a light flickering. He knocked on the door, was greeted by a Black family. You might imagine that a Black family in 1826 in the Deep South who were, I don't know, greeted by a young white man might be a little bit reluctant to engage them, things being what they were. But the family took him in, gave him a place to sleep, fed him, and the next morning they helped him get on his way. And young 16-year-old Sam Meharry was said to have said, I don't have anything now, but if I do ever have resources, I'm going to do something for Black people to repay your kindness. Next slide, David. Sure enough, 50 years later, Samuel Meharry and his 4 brothers gave a gift of $30,000 through the church, to Central Tennessee College to start a medical department specifically for uh, Blacks and disadvantaged people here in the Nashville community. And there's an interesting part of this story I want to tell, which is really shocking to some people. Next slide, David. There are some key players in the founding of Meharry Medical College, one of whom is Reverend John Braden, who was president of Central Tennessee College. He saw the suffering and death among Black people in the Nashville area, and decided he wanted to do something about it. Next slide, David. Punch it one more time. He reached out to Reverend Sam Meharry about whether or not the Meharry family would assist him in doing something to alleviate the situation. So Sam and his four brothers, as I said, made a gift to Central Tennessee College to the church. And there are two other key players that makes for a very interesting story. So David, if you click twice, George Hubbard was a Union medical corpsman who got to know William Snead during a break in the fighting between the Union Army and Confederate Army. But these two men collaborated to create Meharry Medical College, or the department. And it's a striking example of how two men of completely different sides of things can come together to collaborate. So many people don't realize that George Hubbard and William Snead were on opposite sides of the war. And the other thing you may not know is that William Snead was a faculty member at Nashville Medical School, and he convinced George Hubbard to come back to Nashville and do medical school there. And if you didn't know this, Nashville Medical School became Vanderbilt Medical School. So in a way, Meharry's existence has been tied to Vanderbilt's from the very beginning, because William Snead trained Dr. Hubbard, and they got together to create Meharry Medical College, funded by Sam and his brothers. Next slide, David. So Meharry's always been affiliated with the church since its founding in 1876. We may be the only school of our kind that has God in the motto. If you hit one more time, David, to remind people that our motto is worship of God through service to mankind. And that's been our motto since 1876. And again, we may be the only academic health science center in the country that has God in its motto. Next slide, please. So, a Black family showed an act of grace and kindness to a white teenage boy who made a promise and kept the promise 50 years later. And the result was a unique institution that changed history, literally changed history in our country, especially for African Americans. Next slide, David. So, can you go back one? One of the things that is very significant to talk about when you talk about Meharry, okay, David, right there, is the Flexner Report. So in 1910, the Carnegie Foundation commissioned Abraham Flexner to do a report on the state of American medical education. And the report he issued closed almost all of the rural medical schools and 5 of the 7 African American medical schools at the time. The only 2 Black schools that survived was Meharry and Howard. And Flexner was really devoted to or committed to the germ theory, in which he argued that if African Americans were not properly treated for their pestilences and diseases, that could have a huge threat on the health of upper class white Americans. So one of the quotes that I lifted from his report is that the practice of the Negro doctor will be limited to his own race, which in turn, they'll be better cared for by adequately trained Black doctors than poorly treated by poorly trained white doctors. And he made the point that the 10 million African Americans or Africans, Blacks living in the country, were spreading pestilence and disease to the white population. Therefore, it was in the best interest of everyone that Black people learn to become healers. What is also not mentioned here is that Flexner reflected that maybe the best role for Black physicians were to be hygienists supporting the white physicians, which never seems to get mentioned by him. So although he spared Meharry and Howard, his expectations from our 2 schools were quite in this video. Now, the next slide, David. So another point to let you know is that we never had a Black president until 1952. And I think it's very significant that our first president was a PhD, not a DDS or an MD, Harold West. And Harold West is the one who really got research at Meharry Medical College started, created our first graduate program. I think he had a couple of grants from NIH, which was really unusual at the time for African American to do that. And before Harold West became president of Meharry, the board of Meharry met in New York City and never actually came to Nashville. So they were very disconnected from things on the ground because they were all white men. They all met in New York. So there was a disconnect between our board and the institution itself. Next slide, please, David. I do want to share with you another one story. The Sam Meharry story is a really powerful one story, how one person could change the fate of so many millions over these years. Another one story that I really want to relate to you is Esther McCready. So, by the way, David, you're going backwards.
I'm trying. Oh,
Okay. So, as you know, the Supreme Court in the 30s and 40s had some really profound um, rulings on race and education. And David, if you can go to the next slide, please, sir. I want to tell you about something called the Southern Regional Educational Board. Has anyone ever heard of the SREB by any chance? So it's been around for a very long time. What it does is it works to improve public education at all levels, high school, K through 12, and college. There are 758 participating institutions across 16 states, and now more than 7.5 million students are being served by the SREB. But the way they got to start is one I'm going to share with you. Next slide, David. So you can click twice. So as you know, in 1896, Supreme Court upheld the principle that education could be separate as long as it was equal. And after that, all of the southern states passed laws excluding African Americans from their public tax-supported institutions. Next slide. Next punch, Dave. Then they reversed themselves in 1938 when they ruled that schools had to provide for graduate education of African Americans and whites equally. Furthermore, that providing scholarships for Black students to go someplace out of state was not satisfying this requirement. I do want to note that most of the southern states, if not all of them, completely ignored the Gaines decision. Next slide, Dave. So I've already told you this, that Meharry became one of the most, lauded places for Blacks to become educated as healers, doctors, dentists, pharmacists, nurses. But the revenues we got from tuition didn't cover the cost of doing this. So by the 1940s, many southern states were paying the tuition, room and board for Black students from their states to come to Nashville for professional school. And these states were trying to meet the mandate of the Supreme Court while keeping their institutions all white. Next slide, Dave. So in 1949, in February, at a resort in Florida, the governors of these 16 states listed, including Tennessee, and the president of Meharry Medical College, a dentist, these are all white men who got together in Florida at this resort to create the Southern Regional Educational Board. The sole purpose of the SREB was to make Meharry Medical College a publicly owned, publicly funded, multi-state institution so that these governors could send Black kids to Nashville and keep their institutions all white. They were going to make Meharry this institution to allow them to keep all their schools all white. Next slide. But they didn't count on a young lady named Esther McCready, who grew up in East Baltimore. She was a brilliant student, very talented. She applied to nursing school at University of Maryland. They rejected her and made it clear to her that she's being rejected because of her race. They offered to send her to Nashville to Meharry Medical College, which had a nursing school at the time. She didn't want to go to Nashville. She wanted to stay in Baltimore with her family. So she sued the state of Maryland. But the Baltimore City Court ruled in favor of the state. But she was not done. Next slide, David. She appealed her case, and a future justice of the Supreme Court took her case, Thurgood Marshall, and won her case. Because she won her case, the University of Maryland School of Nursing was forced to admit her. And what that meant was the grand plans of these 16 governors and the president of Meharry Medical College was blown up. because once it happened in Maryland, it happened all throughout the South. So next slide, please. So this young teenage girl who decided she was not going to be judged by her skin color changed the course of African American history in health professions, because when she did what she did, all the states that were part of this conspiracy, the SREB, abandoned their plans, had to admit Black students into their professional schools, all because of this one teenage girl who decided she wanted to stay in Maryland, not come to Nashville. Next slide, David. So, oh, one of the things I want to point out is over the years that we've been in existence, we've actually taken students who've been rejected under various circumstances by other institutions. A great example of this is Huda Zogby, who uh, is at Baylor College of Medicine. She has founded an Institute for Neuroscience, raised $200 million for it, and I think she's a legitimate candidate for a Nobel Prize. She loves telling the story of how, just telling the truth, Vanderbilt, all the schools in the South and all over the country actually rejected her. And now many of them are trying to recruit her to join their faculty since she's this world-class neuroscientist. And she turns them all down flat because of how she was treated when she came over to the country in the first place. I do want to point out that also Jews were not being admitted to white medical and dental schools in the South, and Meharry Medical College accepted many of them into our programs. So not only do we train Black students who could not get into white schools, we also train Jewish students for the same reason. And many of them have graduated from Meharry's medical school and dental school. It's a great part of our legacy. Next slide, David. So now from our humble beginnings of having a medical school and dental school, we have 5 schools and a PA program. Medicine and dentistry are legacy schools. School of Graduate Studies was founded about 50 years ago. 3 years ago, we started the School of Applied Computational Sciences that does biomedical data science, and artificial intelligence. And they're already getting these large grants from agencies such as NIH, NSF, and NASA to do the research they do. And last October, the board approved me to launch a School of Global Health, where we're trying to approach health equity from a different perspective than just public health. We're going to start a School of Public Health, but see if the accrediting body is very prescriptive in what you can do in your school. They provide prescription for the faculty you hire, the curriculum you offer, many other things. We believe that achieving health equity can only happen when collaborations across disciplines happen. Policy, epidemiology, data science, law, all those things have to be together, working together. So our School of Global Health is the only one of its kind in the United States, and that's going to be our focus. Next slide, please, David. So largely because of the work we did in the pandemic, let me just say that before the pandemic happened, probably 80% of the people in Nashville did not know there were 2 medical schools, Meharry and Vanderbilt. They knew about Vanderbilt, but none of them knew what a Meharry was or even that we existed. But given the work we did in the pandemic, I would venture to say that there are very few people in Nashville now who don't know that Meharry is here and that we do what we do. And I would like to say the world has taken notice, because in the last 4 years, we've gotten some really large gifts. Bloomberg gave us $34 million. McKinsey Scott gave us $20 million. Chan Zuckerberg, $11.5 million. And recently, just in April of this year, we got an anonymous gift of $20 million. And there's more to come from that source. So we have a $350 million campaign underway, and we raised $194 million so far, and things are looking good. The next thing to point out to you is that over the last 5 years, we have more than tripled our research base from 29 million to 110 million. And some of that, in fact, a good piece of that relates to HIV research. That's been a major focus for us. Next slide, David. So I do want to mention the Together for Change initiative. You can go ahead, David. So Together for Change is an initiative we launched last October. after 3 years of negotiating with the pharma companies. Next slide, Dave. So, uh, oh, the whole purpose of this partnership we have is because we believe that our communities deserve better health outcomes. Next slide, David. And there is an urgency we feel in getting African Americans both involved in clinical research, but also to make sure they're aware of how important it is to be a part of the transformation in healthcare taking place because of AI and genomics studies. Next slide, David. So, Together for Change stands for Changing Healthcare for People of African Ancestry through an international genomics and equity initiative. Next slide, David. So our mission is to make sure that there's no gap in moving forward as these discoveries are being made based on genomics, data science, and the other approaches that we're taking. So it's really important to us that we not find ourselves on the outside looking in. Next slide, Dave. So the goals of Together for Change are 5. One is we want to make sure we're empowering communities to understand and make informed decisions about research, especially as it relates to genomics. We also want to deepen the STEM education among people of color. So we're starting some K through 12 programs, including a DNA Learning Center that's going to be run by Marine Biological Laboratories in Cold Spring Harbor here on our campus. We're creating a genetics counseling workforce program to increase the number of minorities who are genetic counselors. We're also going to increase the number of African American and minority scientists who do genomics research. And this database we're creating, we're going to make sure they have access to it. But the most important part of this whole thing is our efforts to recruit 500,000 people of African ancestry and sequence their genomes and exomes. It'll be a unique data set and one that ensures that going forward, the research based on genomics and looking for new treatments for diseases, new interventions, that Blacks and minorities can benefit from those things, as well as people of European ancestry. I should mention, some of you know this, the first human genome was fully sequenced in 2003. It took 10 years, cost $1.5 billion, and hundreds, if not thousands, of scientists were involved. Now, we can take 1 ml of blood or a couple of mils of blood, and in 4 hours have a complete genome sequence from a human at a cost of about $700. Regeneron can do it even faster and cheaper than that. So many hundreds and thousands of genomes have been sequenced, but only 1.2% of them come from people of African ancestry, and that's a problem. And we're going to try to solve that problem. Next, David. So again, one of the things I'm really excited about is the programs we're creating for K through 12 students and undergraduates, because I don't believe that students can get excited about something that they're not exposed to. So a big part of what we're doing is to make sure that K through 12 students and undergraduates at HBCUs can get exposed to this exciting and really impactful research. Next slide, David. So the thing that's unique and different about the T4C initiative is that middle statement is what's really important. This is a partnership between an HBCU and 4 large pharmaceutical companies: Regeneron, Novo Nordisk, AstraZeneca, and Roche. And each of them are contributing $20 million at least to this effort, which will take about 5 to 10 years to complete. And we believe it's going to be I believe it's going to be one of the most important things I've been associated with in my whole career, because it has the potential for having generational impact, both for health, but also for people who go into STEM and pursue this exciting work. Next slide, Dave. So we can skip this. The other thing I want to let you know is that Oracle, as you know, got $65 million from the state to bring their health campus to Nashville. I have some problems with this because Oracle has about $20 billion of cash in the bank. So why do they need $65 million from Tennessee to do this? Anyway, but that's another story. Next one, David. You punch one more time. Larry Ellison himself, who is the founder and chairman of Oracle, made a big deal about this because he's calling this not just a campus, but a community. And they want to have a community clinic as part of what they're doing that has that showcases all of amazing technologies from Oracle. Next slide, David. What's exciting for me is that they're building their headquarters here, not just having this campus here for health. They're building their world headquarters, is moving from Texas to Nashville and North Nashville. Next. And they've asked us, Meharry, to partner with them to create this community life center that'll be named. What it is, next slide, David, is they would like to partner with us to demonstrate that health disparities can be eliminated if technologies are brought to bear with addressing the social determinants of health. Next slide, Dave.
Oops.
So this partnership that we're describing, you're going.
I hit the wrong button.
That's okay. So they've asked to partner with Meharry to create this prototype community clinic. It's really more than that, to demonstrate that, again, we can eliminate health disparities by addressing the social determinants of health and bringing technology to bear on these issues. Next slide, Dave. Some of you don't remember this, but in 2017, after we announced a limited partnership with HCA to train our students. Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Okay. Are we back?
Oh, yeah. Can you see?
So anyway, in 2017, our mayor, Megan Barry, made the announcement after we had this limited partnership with HCA that she could close NGH because NGH was our primary teaching hospital. And if we're partnering with HCA, she felt the city didn't have to support NGH. It was a disaster for us because within hours of her making that announcement, nurses resigned and about 25 of our in-hospital physicians left just because she made that statement. You can't blame them because if you're a hospital-based physician and the mayor has said she's closing the hospital, that's what you would do, right? Next slide, David. But she let me, you can go one more. Well, the bottom line is we're partnering with Oracle to create this historic partnership between one of the world's leading technology companies to create a new model for how we deal with health disparities. And I'm really excited about it because, as you know, Oracle is a juggernaut and they have unlimited resources. And they chose to partner with us to demonstrate this can happen. Next slide, David. The last thing I want to share with you is that 5 years ago, after a lot of work on my part, the board allowed me to start a limited liability company called Meharry Medical College Ventures. It is a for-profit entity that's designed to take on joint ventures and investments in mission-related activities as a new revenue stream for Meharry, in addition to tuition, research, and clinical practice. Next slide, David. One of the things we're doing in MMC Ventures is launching an investment fund called the MMC Ventures. We're going to raise $100 million and make selective investments in companies that reflect our values related to health equity. Next slide, Dave. So we're going to invest in early stage companies, very early stage companies that are focused on healthcare, but not just healthcare, focused on things related to health equity and addressing disparities in how healthcare is delivered. Next slide, Dave. We've already made 4 investments in various companies across the country that are doing the kind of thing I'm describing, including one that we started, Heal 90, that emphasizes medicine, food as medicine, and hundreds of people are going through this course. Many of them have dropped their medicines completely for heart disease, high blood pressure, etc. And we're really excited about it. And the last thing I want to do, the time we have left, is tell you my personal story with Meharry. That's all right. Next slide, Dave. Oh, this must be the wrong presentation. Anyway, what I was going to tell you was that in 2004, I got a call from David Grandison asking me if I'd be willing to come to Nashville to be the founding director of the HIV Center at Meharry. I said no twice, about 3 months apart. And then Meharry did something really sneaky. They called my wife, and my wife convinced me that I should take a look at this position, mainly because she didn't think that Baltimore would be a great place to raise our teenage son. So I came for a visit in December of 2004, and it actually changed my life. I'm not exaggerating, because I'd never been at a place where the faculty, students, and staff were so focused on a mission. And that mission was to make sure that minority communities and disadvantaged communities could have opportunities to be healed and become healers. So I came in 2005, recruited 5 investigators who are still here: CV Dash, Waldemar Popik, Donald Alcindor, Ben Dong Lu, and Zing Hon Dong. They were all my recruits back in 2005 and 2006. They're all still here and doing really well. What I was also going to show you is I have a personal family connection to Meharry. I was giving a talk at Temple Church about 3 years ago, and a lady came up to me afterwards to say she was from Jackson, Tennessee, and their family had lost a really cherished physician that took care of them named Dr. Hildreth. And she wondered if I was related to him. I said, I don't think so. I don't have family here in Tennessee. But I came back and asked our archivist to check whether or not Meharry Medical College had ever trained a physician with the last name Hildreth. Within 3 hours, she sent me back a picture of the class of 1916, and 4 places over from the president, Dr. Hubbard, was a young man named Isaiah Leon Hildreth, who was graduated on MD. My sister Ellen, who is our family genealogist, did some research and found out that Dr. Isaiah Leon Hildreth is my great uncle. So I have a personal connection to Meharry that I never knew before, and it just makes it all the more humbling for me to be in the role that I'm in. And I wish these technical things didn't happen so I could have taken more time. But anyway, that's what I want to share with you all today. It's just to have, that we have a really rich history. We've been connected to Vanderbilt from the very beginning when these Confederate and Union medics got together. And I think that's something we should all know and keep in mind. And that's it.